Okay, so coming off the scalp, following the direction. This is really difficult to do with the camera in the way. So a little bit of color. It's where you got to start paying really close attention to the direction. Of your hair. Now in here, just going to come in, put a little dark in here. I'll have to add some small tight line. I'm going to have to go back and put some reducer in the cup, because these dagger strokes are not very clean at all. And you just start coming in, pulling those small randoms out. Make sure paint's drying really fast too. Remember, we're not getting into the really tight stuff yet. Okay, I think I narrowed it down to some bad reducer. That's why I keep having problems. So, gotta get a bottle. Now, that texture is not a real common one outside of hair, where you got that sharp edge. Into the blend and then folding up underneath something. So it's dark here, lightens up there. So you could just use your eraser to create that sharp edge. You can use freehand work to create your sharp edge. But that stencil, or having some kind of stencil, makes it a little easier to manage. And then you just pull out. Like up here, I've got to get some more color. Up here, these clumps of hair run back. They start to come back to here. You got some small ones. We'll worry about the small ones at the end because we're going to do them with the blade. You can use the blade at any time. Once we get everything established and we think we're close, I will use the blade instead of the eraser. See how the eraser is taking out like chunks of hair. And all hair doesn't have to be done this way, but this light hair like this that has a ton of work in it compared to most hairs, it's just because the subtlety of tones, and I just find it easier to work with this kind of hair that way. See, now I'm going to put my reference up close so you really see what's going on here. And I'll come in, not lose all my texture that I've already put in there. I'll still have to do a little more work, but I can darken that. Here, I'm just going to put a little bit of color. It's this black color. But I have to be careful because when I get over here, these tones underneath closest to the face are more reddish tones. So that line comes down. And I'm working with this transparent, so again, I've got to make sure the grays are where the grays are and change color when I get down close. See, as I get these, how much easier that is. I don't have to do, and I'm not just sitting here throwing lines in, guys. You know, it's not big. Don't go in here and try to paint your hair. Just look for the major spots. Put a little bit of color in there. If I don't edit that part out, I'm sorry. I'll mean to. A lot of footage to dig through. Okay, I'm not just throwing these lines in, I'm throwing these chunks of hair. Again, the only place that I'm not doing the normal chunks of hair on this are at the scalp, where I have a lot of stuff going on that needs to be a little bit tighter. Everywhere else, we'll still work in the normal way you've seen me work before. And see, from a little bit of a distance, it's really starting to look pretty good already. Just pay attention to your directional. Now, like I said, when I get up in here, I'm not going to put a whole lot of that gray in. I'm only have a couple of little spots I'll put in right here. Just a tiny amount. And over here, I've already put this out. I'm going to pull some stuff in. I need to erase that line. This is one of my marking lines. This is where the hair does a little bit of change. So you got hair, you got this chunk of hair that comes down here and then it breaks off because it's underneath this piece right here. So it winds up looking something like this edge. It's just got a little bit of a shadow in it. And then the hair's right up underneath there. And we'll tie some of those colors from, some of those colors from here into it for a much more natural appearance. I can use a little bit of grays here. That hair rolls over like this. So this edge of the hair, right through here, I'm going to go ahead and put some more paint on than what I need because I want you to see it. But I can pull it back off. That edge right there. See how it kind of rolls there? And you'll watch when I start pulling out how that will very, very quickly give more volume and depth to it. This comes underneath that hair right there. So, like I was saying before, you got a couple of ways to go about that. You can erase to get that edge. If I just bring my eraser right across that edge, now it's creating a sharp edge for me. I'm going to come in with my pencil eraser and see some of these spots again need to be darker, and if we take too much out, we'll need to put a crisp edge. Every so often it's got a dark spot in there, and you don't have to be in exact position, but you want to be, following your direction. So I'll have a hair that's sitting back, and then hair that's in front of it. I also need to mention two things. One, I'm on TerraSlate, which holds paint pretty tight, so it's a little harder to erase. If I was doing this on Yupo, this paint would come right off. Two, I painted an extraordinarily light layer. When you paint for scratching, the thicker the paint is, and it's still, when it's thick and still wet and you wipe on it, it'll immediately come back to your surface if you're working on any kind of, semi hard surface. So while the paint's still wet somewhat, it's very easy to manipulate. When you put a really thin layer and wait a minute, it's not as easy to manipulate. In this particular case with TerraSlate, it takes, a good bit of pressure to pull the paint back off. And that's okay. I'm used to dealing with it. I like it because at the same token, this paint I put on here yesterday, my fingers won't scratch it. I don't have to worry about accidentally scratching things. That's why I work with it. I have worked with other mediums or other surfaces. Some better than others. Some I like better than others. But I much prefer the hold of the paint being so strong for the way I work. It does take more effort to scratch and erase on it, but it works out really well for me, and I think it makes a really durable painting, so which is also a benefit to me as well. Like, I could literally probably in just a few minutes walk over to my kitchen sink and run this over water and not lose my painting. I've shown that and done that. I'm not going to do it with this particular painting because I'm not going to take that chance. Not with this painting. But I can show you guys. Just reach out and ask me to show a video of that, and I will. When using your Blackbeard wheat, I don't know if anybody else does this or not, but you can take and tape off the edge. And then you can, if you get that taped down good, tape it off. You can bend it so that you can get in here with your curves. And I got a couple of them to put in. That one I wanted to show really well, so I did it a little bit on the dark side. Okay, now the color I have chosen here is brown iron oxide. Just straight out of the bottle. I couldn't mix up the color, but that's what it looks like if I put a little bit too much in there. It's going to drop. Get in here really close and show you guys how I'm going to deal with this section right here. So remember, this hair is tucked under that hair there, so we need to create just a little bit of shadow. So I want to just gently bring it in. Then I'll run that brown off. This brown is again my shadow in the hair. I've already got a little bit of texture going on there. And then we'll have a few stray hairs coming in, but we'll do that after we finalize our skin tones. I know I keep talking about that, harping on that. So I had already talked about how these tones were different, so what we got to do now is come in with more of those browns on this outer edge, which we're going to do the same, just real gentle strokes, following our direction. And this color can quickly overpower this because it's way too dark in its base form. But we got to pull out some erasing. So now I will come over also with the brown also into the gray areas. Down here, a little bit darker, we'll come in with some darker tones again towards the end. We're just building some volume of hair. And of course, multiple different ways to go about it. I got a few spots that need to be pretty darkened in here, so don't worry about taping off on that TerraSlate. I can get on it pretty fast. So reposition that so find the way I want that to flow. Do I always do this? No. Usually I don't take this much care. Now you see how that's holding in place. Now I can get those lines in where I want them very easily. I'll have some more grays to bring on top of this. Little subtle tonal changes here throughout. Matter of fact, this area right here needs to be a bit darker. But I don't want to go too far because I'll get into that golden blonde hair if I go too far with this color. And see, this is where you could have a choice, because this color right here is, in my opinion, one of the harder colors to deal with, because transparent can get too dark really, really quickly. And see, this paint's still wet, so notice how quickly and easily these come out. But back on the train of thought I was talking about, this color here is one of the most difficult colors, because if you mix it with an opaque, you won't be able to do a whole lot of scratching without losing all that opaque work. However, this particular hair, partially because of the color, has a great deal of texture in it in comparison. Most hairs do not need that level of fine hairs. This
hair the way it's in here has a great deal of detail and a great deal of finer strokes to put in than most hairs I've come across. If you were dealing with a regular golden yellow, of course I've talked about that. I showed you guys that color on how I do that on a small hairpiece in another tutorial here. And if you're watching this tutorial, you have access to that other tutorial.